Welcome to Real Estate Rewind. I'm your host, Tyson Schuetze. I am the founder of Auben Realty and Auben Capital Partners, and I am excited today to have several special guests with us, representing a large geographic area of Auben team members. And I will introduce them in a minute, but just a reminder for folks about Real Estate Rewind. We are on Spotify, Apple Music, and YouTube. You can like and subscribe us by looking up Real Estate Rewind with Tyson Schuetze. So, in joining me today in studio, I've got Erin Eisele, who was sitting in my chair, the host chair, for some earlier episodes, but is now here to make sure that we stay on track. So, welcome, Erin.
Thanks, Tyson. I'm happy to be here.
For those that may have missed some of the earlier episodes, Erin assists Auben, has been a key team member in helping us build out the marketing, branding, and direction of Auben for the past several years, and also is very active in a number of small businesses in Aiken and thriving in that downtown community there. So thank you for joining us, Erin. So we also have one of our longest tenured team members, Jason Weathers from Chattanooga, who's our market director. Welcome, Jason.
Hey, everybody. Good to be with you today.
And you joined us in 2019, correct? And it's going to be 7 years this month, right?
That's it. 7 years.
That's it. And we had in a previous episode with you, we had a special guest of your dog Tucker. Is Tucker going to be joining this episode, or has he moved on to other things?
Tucker's moved on to a nap currently, hopefully. So, but if he, it just depends. He may make himself known any minute now.
Okay, well he's got to get that rest in. So we'll see if Tucker reappears. And then we've got Kristen Brady, one of our newest team members, based out of Houston, and you're joining today. Welcome, Kristen.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and Kristen is on the sales side, longtime Houston native, and then what we wanted to do today is really get together two of our different team members and markets and talk about both why they love where they live, and then what it means or what people should consider when they're looking at either relocating, living, or one of the main thing that Auben assists people with, investing in these markets. As a reminder for our audience, Auben is in 10 different markets currently, and the way we think about what markets that we go into is we're looking for dynamic growth markets that are favorable for investors and feel like they have a high quality of living to, be friendly for businesses, attractive for residents. And really, at the end of the day, from Auben's perspective, we wouldn't go into any market that we wouldn't also considering owning property. It's cool for me to also really get to learn, and for our clients to get to learn about these markets from locals. And I know, Jason, you and Kristen have slightly different journeys. Jason, you grew up in Chattanooga, where you're based, moved away to Charlotte for about 12 years, and moved back, 7 years ago, right when you joined Auben, correct?
That's correct. Yep.
Yeah. So you've been able to see how dynamic your market has changed, both from the perspective of somebody that lived there and then somebody that left and came back. So, we're looking forward to hearing that. And Kristen, you've basically lived your entire life in Houston, except for a small portion of time abroad. You were born and raised in Houston and live there currently, correct?
Yes, I do.
Okay, cool. Well, so Jason and Kristen, if I'm considering, looking at moving to Chattanooga or Houston, what would be one of the main compelling reasons as to why Chattanooga or Houston would be a great place to live?
One thing for Chattanooga is just how vibrant the city is and has been over the course of the last few years, and the growth and things of that nature. The outdoor activities are just so appealing to those that continue to live here and relocate to Chattanooga. One of the main factors is, the quality of life for, the outdoor activity and for the cost of living, just being so close to the river and the mountains. And, if to be centrally located right in the middle between other major cities, gives folks an opportunity to still have some travel destinations that are nearby, But just as Chattanooga has continued to grow, plenty of nonstop flights out of Chattanooga to get you to many destinations and just many attractive factors there for the quality of life and as the city continues to grow.
And for those who don't know, Chattanooga is 2 hours north of Atlanta and 2 hours south of Nashville. One similar characteristic that both Chattanooga and the state of Tennessee has, and Houston and the state of Texas, is we're seeing, Auben continues to see huge population inbound migration of people moving to no income tax states. So both of your states have no income tax, which I think has been a big driver of growth. Kristen, if I'm considering Houston, why should I consider Houston? As somebody that was born and raised there, but also lived there their whole life, what do you love about
Yes.
Houston?
Yeah, I mean, Houston is very diverse. Obviously, being one of the fourth largest city in the United States, I've not only just seen the growth personally, but there's continued growth. We have a strong job market in Houston, very diverse economy. Um, Another thing kind of that stands out to me about Houston is just the access to there's the beach is very close. You've got some major airports for travel. There's a huge growth downtown and midtown Houston as far as like fine arts and cuisine and different festivals and activities for people to partake in. So there's always something going on in Houston, and the growth is just it just continues. I mean, even
Yeah.
now, I've even noticed a huge explosion in Houston. So there's definitely a growth of people coming into Houston as well.
Yeah, and I think it's hard to remember sometimes that Houston's the fourth largest city in the country. I mean, there's New York and LA and some of the, larger cities get the headlines, but Houston is huge. And I think you mentioned something that I think is, although Houston and Chattanooga are very different markets and very different cities, the diversity, right? Houston used to be primarily known as a sort of energy, city energy market where the local economy was very dependent on that. And I think that's a big part of it. But there's been many other businesses, industries that have relocated and really grown and thrived in the market. Correct, Kristen?
Yes, no, there's definitely been lots of large corporations that have moved in. So, we just continually seen the expansion, in the job market and people coming into Houston as well.
And there's a really large, growing, and thriving medical community in Houston as well, correct?
Yeah, so the Texas Medical Center is an amazing asset and facility here in Houston. A lot of people fly into Houston just to get, some of those medical procedures and care. So the fact that it's right here is another great attribute to the city.
I will say too, jumping in here, I've never been to Houston either. I haven't been to Chattanooga or Houston, which, I need to go to both of these places. And I have the tour guides to take me around. But I will say one thing I know about Houston is that my husband and I own a wine shop, and he is part of, a large network of wine professionals, and the food and wine scene in Houston rivals that of New York and LA. So I've heard a lot about that in Houston, as well as the arts community there. An old colleague of mine from the Smithsonian, I think, is helping to organize this big contemporary art fair. So it's culturally very rich, from what I understand.
Right, yeah, now we have the museum district. There's a huge, in town, there's a huge arts center. So there's always all different kinds of activities. And yeah, the arts is huge, even music, I would say. There's a lot of just very diverse. Houston is very
Yeah.
diverse in many ways. So that's definitely, I feel like, something for everyone.
It's an interesting, we've talked about this diversity in a number of our podcasts, is that I think that's really a strong attribute that we look for in markets we want to go into. Is we don't want to be in a market where there's only one employer, there's only one dynamic, there, that if anything were to happen to it, it would not be beneficial for our residents, our investors. And so I think Houston and Chattanooga are very different in size, but I think that growth of multiple facets of the cities make them very interesting. So, as you guys think about the different markets and how they've grown, what have you guys seen has changed as it relates to housing? Do you see big shifts that have occurred in housing in your markets, and how has that changed over the past 5 to 10 years in each of your market?
For here in Chattanooga, it's been a lot of growth with multifamily apartment communities being built, just to keep up with the demand of housing needs here. So a lot of new permits that were pulled in the last few years, and all of those, the majority of those complexes and developments are above ground now and housing people. So that's where a lot of land development has taken place within Chattanooga and within 45 minutes, going into North Georgia, going into, Cleveland, Tennessee, just things of that nature that tie into what you mentioned about the dynamics of employment here, whether it's healthcare, logistics, Volkswagen, different aspects of different communities here, neighboring cities that's driving that growth. So it's been a lot of opportunity for growth, build to rent, which wasn't on the radar when I first joined Auben here in Chattanooga. So much in Chattanooga in 2019 has had 4 communities built in the last 4 years. So that's been a space that's now occupied now too.
Yeah, and interesting that I think both of the markets I would say are probably reacting to large inbound populations and needing for more types of housing. Right? You mentioned multifamily and build for rent, which is something we've talked about on a number of episodes. What do you see in Houston, Kristen?
Yeah, for Houston, there's still a big push for the single family homes, but I have seen a little bit of diversification, more duplexes and townhomes. Of course, in town Houston, there was always, a great development of townhomes, but I'm kind of seeing some of that trickle out to the suburbs. So I'm seeing a little bit of product diversification there. And then, of course, there's a huge build-to-rent scene as well in Houston. There's many different communities that are solely for rental. And those are done in a different way. I recently had the opportunity to go look at a build-to-rent community just south of the medical center. And I was actually highly impressed. In that same area, there were a couple different build-to-rent sections, but I got to see the diversification of some of the just basic build-to-rent homes that were kind of put in tightly, and now people are wanting to be in more of a community home feel. So when I went and saw several different sections, there was another section with Willow and Sierra Vista, where they really made a point of creating the homes, even though they were built for rent, they really felt like a home. They
Yeah.
were maintained and manicured, and honestly, it looked like one of the best sections in the neighborhood. And with build to rent is such a huge, or becoming a huge part of people that are looking to rent.
Yeah.
If they want to have options. Renters these days, they're looking at their diversification of options and coming out of maybe an apartment or something on those lines. Being able to be in a nice home, a nice community, and everything's taken care of, that really also helps with, on the investment side, their retention.
Yeah.
You want, in an investment property, you want your tenants to enjoy where they're at, call it home, stay there for more than a year. So I'm seeing on some of those build to rent communities, those are really attracting tenants. So yeah, there's lots going on in Houston, lots of growth. Just definitely seeing a lot of different types of homes being built in Houston. So we're seeing more of a diversification there.
I think also what's interesting is, how and where people live is changing so much. I live in Charleston, and we have similar to Houston and Chattanooga, we have a lot of people moving to the area, and not everybody has a local native friend like you, Jason, or like you, Kristen, to kind of advise where to go. And so you have people that I think come to town to try on a location or area to see if it's where they want to be. And I think what's really cool, Kristen, about the community that you referenced that Auben is assisting with and some of these others is that doesn't have to be any less of a experience for the resident to be in. In many ways, it can mimic the home ownership experience without some of the hassles and the headaches. And so that time that maybe is not spent with some home ownership activities can be spent getting out, into the community, figuring out if, hey, is this particular part of the city that I'm living in, is this where I want to be? How are you guys seeing, people come to the different markets that you're in, decide where they want to be? Like, where are you guys seeing those folks, start their journey, and how is that different from, your all's versions of the communities that you live in, that you grew up in? Jason, you want to go first on that?
Yeah, so a lot of that depends on the demographic. We get a lot of folks that accept, have a job offer. They move to Chattanooga and they rent for a year or two to figure out, where they want to live, where they want to buy, if Chattanooga is going to be long term for them. So, if that's the young professional moving in, they may be attracted to the different neighborhoods that as we discussed, have that outdoor lifestyle, more connected, going out. There's many after work events and things going on that they may tie into the community and location closer to downtown. And the same thing goes for families that are relocating here that are going to appreciate the affordability compared to other larger metropolitan areas, and then retirees that are moving here that they can experience the four seasons, and access quality health care here. So seeing a lot of that pick up over the last few years, where we're seeing more people relocating to work, renting for a year or two, and then we want to keep them long term and have a good experience with them being, moving here into Chattanooga, but often, they find a home to purchase and are staying here just due to the quality of life and their job opportunities.
Yeah, and thanks for that, Jason. Before I go to you, Kristen, I had just recently attended a land and home building conference in Charleston, and it was interesting that they were talking about, and these are large national production home builders, that these different buckets of sort of renters and buyers are merging in a very interesting way that, at different points in life, it may make a lot of sense for somebody to buy, and at different points it may make sense to rent. Or, that could be in the same market within a period of a couple of years. Kristen, I know, not only are you a Houston native, but you've had a lot of experience as an agent, on the sales side. How are you seeing just the overall market change in Houston between people, considering renting before buying, or considering it renting at different stages in their journey compared to some of your earlier days in real estate?
Oh, I've seen the ups and downs. I got in at the recession time in 2008, 2009, so I've definitely seen the ups and downs. But I would say Houston, end of last year to beginning of this year, we've seen the prices pretty much stabilize. So we're back at kind of like and with a steady growth as well. With Houston being as large as it is, to be honest, I think, anybody looking to move to Houston, it's really looking at, if they're moving for a job, or want to be close to certain family or friends, identifying those certain areas, because I've had relocation clients coming to Houston, and I mean, they're really surprised at how large it is. I mean, sometimes it could take you, an hour and a half to get one side of Houston to the other. But definitely, there's a lot of growth both north and south of Houston, and it's continuing. And a lot of it is, again, brought by job growth, people coming into Houston. So that's been something that's been consistent throughout the years.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting too, like we've all been in real estate a long time to be able to see these markets change, and some things don't change in the markets in terms of, you know, the fact that they're cyclical. There's periods of greater growth and periods of stabilization, and but what I think is most interesting is, you know, what I'm seeing more and more is the concept of renting and buying just shifting, right? And people
Yes.
people being more open minded to different options, you know, at different points in their life, right? You know, you bring up a good point about Houston. Is, you know, I haven't spent a ton of time in Houston, but I was coming to market and seeing, you know, some of the really nice assets of our strategic partner, you know, the Willow at Sierra Vista. It was fascinating to me that, you know, the length of time that it could take to get from one portion of the city to another. And so, you know, I think if you're coming into the market and not sure where you want to be, or not needing to be in a certain location for family or friends, you know, starting in a rental capacity can be a really good place for anybody to start, regardless of, you know, job, employment, income, you know, et cetera. So, and that's different than I think it's been in the past. Are you seeing more of that,
Yes,
Kristen?
definitely. Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's definitely right now a lot more renters. And so with that, those renters are looking for different types of options. And then some people, it's just a lifestyle choice. They've just decided, you know, I just want to kind of fill out certain areas, live there for a couple years. You know, they don't have, for them, they don't really have to worry about, you know, the home maintenance and some of the extra cost involved with actually owning a home. So I've seen a lot of renters just decide to, you know, hey, I'm happy to call this home. This feels like home. You know, I'm good. So yeah, there's definitely been a little bit of a change. So yeah, I mean, there's growth in both, but there's definitely, I would say, an influx of, you know, renters right now for sure. You know, for several different reasons, but you know, Houston has a lot to offer. So
So, Jason and Kristen, you guys, you know, have talked about some of the larger sort of things that are attracting people to the city. What do you guys like to do in your city? You know, if you guys have some free time, Jason, what are you doing on the weekend in Chattanooga? What are you doing? What are your favorite parts to go and favorite things to see and interact with in your hometown?
Yeah. It, practically every weekend I'm running on the river walk along the Tennessee River. So I'm getting out and about, and you know, there's different points you can start and run to. So I'm out exploring, you know, that. And as that's connected into more neighborhoods, I can start at different points and see that development. You know, kind of run through the south side of Chattanooga, where the new our minor league baseball team, they just built Erlanger Park on a historic 100-year-old steel mill that's been just dormant for years, and that's been a huge impact. Going to bring in residential, commercial on that pocket. So you know, getting out and about, running, and just seeing some of the changes firsthand as I'm out, exploring a little bit, if you will. So that's one of my favorite things to do, along with a lot of the new developments that have brought different places to go eat and go check out, live music. Chattanooga has had many venues that have been open for a while, or new ones that are attracting more artists here. So, you know, it's just nice to see that, where, you know, you don't have to travel like you used to see live music or events. A lot of that's coming to Chattanooga now.
And I know, you know, we've discussed on other situations that Chattanooga is the first national park city, and it has really spent a lot of time and money connecting the different pieces via a bunch of greenways, right? That's all been new developments in the recent history there.
Yeah, it has been, because you know, Chattanooga was a huge manufacturing town. 50s and 60s, you know, we had the designation of the smoggiest city. It wasn't LA. It wasn't somewhere that you would think of. It was Chattanooga. You know, then that was a national news coverage. So
Not a
lot of
designation
cleanup.
anybody wants, right?
No, no, not at all. So I mean, you know, going from that to be recognized as a national park city is just shows how far Chattanooga has come with developing outdoor activities and creating these green spaces and parks and things like that for outdoor enjoyment for everybody. So I mean, that's a huge thing to have. You know, there's less than a handful of countries worldwide that have the designation like this, and Chattanooga was the first in the United States.
Cool. And I know you mentioned concerts. There's a lot of music coming to Chattanooga. What do you like to do and go see there? Is there certain concerts that you're going to? I think you've got a certain type of music that you're seeking out in Chattanooga that comes there regularly.
Yeah, there's plenty of bands that come here, but anytime we can get a tribute band from the '80s, whether it's Talking Heads or Def Leppard or Bon Jovi, definitely going to go check those out first. So, good thing being here in Chattanooga is that if they are Atlanta and Nashville, 2 hours there and back to go see folks, so can always keep that going.
Nice commute to see your '80s cover band.
That's right. And that was just like Bon Jovi's #1 song from 2005, "Who Says You Can't Go Home." That was the reason I moved back from Charlotte to Chattanooga.
There you go. And also sometimes being on that, like in between the bigger cities, you end up being like the sleeper, the sleeper show. And so like those are actually some of the best venues to see, the live shows. So that's cool, Jason. I'll have to come join you for one of those tribute bands one day.
Well, come on, we get plenty of them throughout the year.
I used to live in Augusta, and like Erin said, we would catch bands in between Atlanta and Charlotte. So sometimes being outside of there. So, Kristen, as a newer team member, I haven't gotten to know what your '80s music taste is or not, but would love to hear what you do. Yeah. Oh, okay. Well, maybe we don't have the we don't have the '80s fan there, but I would love to hear what you do in Houston. I think when we originally started speaking, you were actually going on a trip outside of Houston to some of the area outside there, and you mentioned that there's a number of places, not only in Houston, but you can get to beaches, some beautiful other area in around Houston as well to spend time. So what do you like to do in Houston? What would you advise somebody that's moving to town to seek out when they come to town?
Yeah. I'm a bit of an outdoorsy type person, so definitely I love to be on the water. So there's access to several different lakes. I live near Lake Conroe. Down South Houston, there's Clear Lake. Then obviously there's Galveston. So anytime I can get on the water or on a boat, I'm there. And what really amazed me, honestly, being born and raised in Houston, is Galveston is always there, and I just kind of slept on it. Like, oh yeah, the beach is, less than an hour away. But it wasn't really until I was an adult that I really ventured into Galveston and went further down the coastline. Not like that far out of Galveston, but it really amazed me, the diversification once you kind of get down on the beach. I was like, oh wow, the sand is really nice. The water is, clear. And those are some things that I didn't even get to experience until I was older.
Yeah.
But definitely being close to the beach is nice. Again, I love music. I grew up, in a musical family. So I think it was just last week I was at a concert downtown. These bands came in from Finland and other places, so very diverse.
So what's your music of choice, Kristen? Is maybe
well,
not
it's
the-
all over.
Okay.
It's all over the place, to be honest. But I have to say, this band I saw last week, they did Metallica by cello.
Interesting. So a band from Finland doing Metallica by cello. I don't know that
That
you
is
can get more
correct.
diverse than that. Like I was like, I think that checks all the boxes, right?
Only in Houston, folks.
I was highly shocked. I was like, wow, that is pretty amazing. But yeah, Apocalyptica was the name of them. But yeah,
Nice.
so I listen to
That's
music of
awesome.
all genre. Yeah, I know. I was like, oh, who knew? I didn't know you could do that with a cello. Okay.
I think one of the things that's always, maybe struck me as both fascinating, but also a very simple way of thinking about is like it makes sense to consider investing where people want to live, right? And there's been these big movements of populations, to southern markets like Chattanooga and Texas for a number of reasons. The natural resources, and I think what is right in the backyard. But then as you have more and more people moving to these cities, you get an interesting dynamics of perspectives and backgrounds that create Metallica cello, there, and other things like that. I think that's really what is amazing about where you guys live is these markets take on a new life, even to people that you were born and raised in these cities. And so how do you guys communicate your perspective of the markets that you live in with people that are interested in living there, whether it's residents or investors? How do you all best feel people can get to know the different markets, that we're in to decide if it's the right place for them to invest or live?
Yeah, I just kind of try to get a feel of what their experience has been, whether it's personally or with their investments on the where they're coming from and what they've experienced and seen. How does it compare? How does it contrast to Chattanooga? If there's certain things that they don't like about other markets or their hometown that differs from here, just trying to learn their interest and their perspectives to help guide that question along to just really understand where they're coming from, and what their objective is really, and just having that, being the local leader and eyes and ears of someone looking here for me to be from Chattanooga to share the experience with them briefly, from my time here and things I've seen. So that kind of gives them an overall, picture of how much the city has grown in the last 10 years, what's just recently happened, what's in the pipeline for the next 2 or 3 years, to help gauge that interest.
But I think you nailed it there, Jason, with the objective, right? Because an investor coming into Chattanooga who might be looking for cash flow, and then an investor in Houston, or why Houston might work for them with a more build to rent product, and it's more the longer term equity play. So it's really kind of understanding. And what's great about Auben is that there's not just one opportunity. There are ample opportunities across markets to fit these different objectives.
Yeah, and we work with many investors. In some recent conversations, we're like, I've built my portfolio out. I've got some C to B minus B properties that I'm fine there, and but I understand what that portfolio is going to do and how it's going to perform. But now I want to go into something new, and it's going to be because I'm going to see the equity in that property with years to come. They don't want to sell what they have currently. They just want to take a different approach. So that mind shift, can change. Where I've been working with someone for 5 years, and their mindset's always been to, find properties that they could add value to. A little bit under market, need some repairs, but now they're like, hey, I've done that. I'm tired of doing that. And, you experience trouble along the way. You start peeling back that onion. You're going to discover more is needed, and it just cuts into your overall plan. So some of that mindset has shifted as conversations and growth is happening in markets. And like in Chattanooga, well, 5 years ago we couldn't promote certain build to rent communities. That wasn't happening here, but now we can. And Auben as well can have that conversation because we're involved in that in other markets to lead that investor, to look at all aspects in different markets.
Yeah, and that's a great point, Jason. Before I flip it over to you, Kristen, I think one of the interesting things that Auben his journey has been on, it's been similar for my own personal journey as I started more in markets like Chattanooga, where you had what are called more value add properties that you buy an older aged asset and you improve it. Those properties are given classifications based on their location, their condition, every B, C class, but also realizing there can be a lot of value in owning newer construction product that is more predictable and, as Erin said, has some higher potential for appreciation and equity growth. And that's led Auben into markets like Houston, Kristen, where you are, where there is you only need to spend a very little time in Houston and realize how much growth there is there currently, but how much is likely going to continue in the future. And with that, that can be more dynamic upside for investors, but it may also mean when the investor is buying in that maybe there's a little bit less cash flow, at least initially, or maybe appearances of less cash flow, without realizing that there could be better cash flow because you're not doing repairs and maintenance. So, Kristen, how do you think about the Houston market, or how have you seen people attracted to Houston market compared to other places where they've invested historically?
Yeah, I mean, again, Houston has a variety of options. So there's a lot of different types of assets that you can invest in. But one thing with Houston is there is still, like, housing is affordable, the housing affordability for an investor to get into the market. And then again, with the newer homes, there may be a little bit of less cash flow in the beginning, but long term, when you're doing a buy and hold, there's just less maintenance. There's less capex that you're having to spend. So down the line, you'll see not only the equity and the value appreciate over time, but then you'll be spending less money having to maintain the home, fixing some of those larger items. So back when I was investing with the hedge funds, there was a lot of older homes that we eventually we weren't able to acquire because it required so much maintenance. So that's one key thing with a newer construction or something that's newer is, you don't really have to necessarily worry about, okay, do I have to replace the roof or do I have to replace the AC? Because everybody knows in Houston, we definitely need our air conditioning. So yeah, there's definitely perks to some of the newer construction options as well, and energy efficiency.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a good point too, is that it can be a easier ownership experience, right? The owners can be in a position where they have to make less decisions on, what they do with their cash flow, and what seemingly may on the front end appear as less, profitable can be better over time, particularly if you have a longer term strategy. If you're not looking to just get in and out of the market, some of these newer construction assets can perform significantly better than some of the age inventory as you hold them over time, right?
Yes.
So I think one of the things that's interesting about Auben and what we're seeking to do investors is also give investors the option to do both, right? That they can have, like most investors, I think, the word that we've used on this podcast a number of times is diversity of having a diverse portfolio of, it doesn't have to be an either or where you have investment in a primary market like Houston, that's the fourth largest, city in the country, or investment in a growing market like Chattanooga, that's a secondary, tertiary market, that maybe you're owning a older vintage asset because that's what's more readily available. You can have the opportunity to, working with Auben, own both, right? And have
Yeah.
individuals in market, Kristen like yourself or Jason like you, that can help talk through the appropriateness for the investor, because it's also, investors want different things and have different time horizons as to how long they're willing to hold it or what their objectives are. How have you guys seen that different? And both of you all have had long tenured experience. How's that different for different investors, and how do you meet those objectives with the market when you're meeting people in their investment journey?
Yeah, it's just, talking through their particular scenario. It's for some investors, the better opportunity may be not to, squeeze out another few years of an aging asset, just due to, some of the CapEx items that they are dealing with. It may be recognizing the equity that they have built, selling at a strong, price point from where they entered the market at, and then deploying that capital into new properties that may be a better fit for them, for the strategy, to be more consistent. If that's what they're going after, just, hey, I, don't care if I clear 500 a month like I do at this property on a good month because it's unpredictable. I'd rather, have half that, but it be stable and consistent. And so that's just where we have ongoing conversations for their, those needs for long-term goals.
Cool. And Kristen, how do you see it? You've worked with institutions, you've worked with individuals, you've worked with a number of different, residents, homeowners, all different. You've seen it from a number of sides. How do you, help people evaluate what is right for them at the, point of acquisition in the process?
Yeah, I mean, every investor has their own idea of like what they're looking for. So, we'll have those conversations and discuss what's available. Another thing, though, too, that I like to bring to the table is different options. A lot of times, sometimes investors get stuck looking at one certain type of asset and, maybe not have been open-minded in the past to other types of maybe even a townhome or a duplex or even a smaller multifamily. And so a lot of times you can have those conversations where that'll help them diversify their portfolio. And a lot of it is readily available here in Houston. So I like to show just different options as well. We all know that we have to pivot with the market, and the market has led us different places at different times. So it's just really having those conversations to try to meet their goals. And then, too, sometimes I like to add in there's also this option, over here. And then a lot of times they're like, oh, I didn't really realize I can, that's a great asset to invest in. So I'm always keeping my eyes and ears open for, what else is out there. There's also a huge off market, assets that are held off market. So a lot of times with my different networking and all of that, I'm able to bring off market properties to investors where they otherwise wouldn't have probably seen them.
Yeah, and that's a great point, Kristen. I appreciate that. Is the diversity that some investors want or potentially should have in their portfolio can occur in one market, right? You can have, different types of residential assets that have very different dynamics and different benefits and different, pieces for people to consider. So, well, I thank you guys both for joining the podcast today. I would love to hear, if you only had 36 hours in your city, what should somebody do in your markets?
36 hours here in Chattanooga, I would definitely, have a mixture of things. We got some local museums here that are great. If you're into, looking at art and sculptures and things of that nature that you can spend your time doing. A lot of smaller mom and pop shops that are, at the Bluffview Art District. There's some, coffee shops and art studios that are right there. As you're walking outdoors, seeing all that, you can still pop in and see some of the, what the locals have here in Chattanooga. So, I would take in a mixture of that, and just, downtown is so walkable in many aspects. The Tennessee Aquarium that's here, it's a fantastic aquarium. Our Chattanooga Zoo, you can really, just make a plan and knock out so much, due to the proximity of all of our attractions here. But also, find there's a lot of locally owned coffee shops, a couple of local record stores, that are unique to Chattanooga. So I would seek those out.
So in Jason's tour of Chattanooga, we're doing art, coffee, and records. I like it. Those are cool things.
Yep.
So, Kristen, what are we doing in Houston for 36 hours?
Let me see. Well, definitely I wouldn't. I mean, there's such a great variety of cuisine. So for sure, going in town, trying all different types of foods. We have the museum district. There's tons of fine arts. I love my music, so there's plenty of the live music going on. And then if you can get down to any of the water, the lakes, they're wonderful. There's just, I don't know, 36 hours might not be enough time, but
So we're doing food, art, and water in your version of Houston.
yes,
Right? All
we
right.
could fit in a little bit of boating as well. Yeah.
Kristen, have you ever been to the Rothko Chapel in Houston?
Well, is that the one downtown? I think.
It's the
have.
Rothko
Yes,
Chapel.
I have. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've always wanted to go there. So when I come there, we've got to go to the Rothko Chapel. Um,
Yes,
I've
there's
always wanted to
there's
see that.
lots to see. You know, even in town, there's the Heights area that's very eclectic, and there's just a lot of history for sure as well to see throughout Houston.
And sorry, the Rothko Chapel is referencing the artist Mark Rothko.
Yes.
All right.
was
Well,
like-
we've got Aaron and Kristen are going to go to the Rothko Chapel, and we've got reasons to go to Chattanooga and Houston. Jason and Kristen, thank you guys very much for participating in Real Estate Rewind. You know, I think it's really cool to be able to learn about your cities, you know, from locals, right? I mean, I think that's I've really enjoyed as I've come into the different markets, is seeing the love that you guys have for where you live. It translates into, you know, giving a version that other people can decide if that's the right place for them to live and invest. So thank you guys very much for joining our episode today. We appreciate it.
Yep, appreciate being here. Thank you.
Thank you for having. Thank you for
All
having
right.
me.
You have a great day.
Okay.